Angela Yee, your host of a new show by Acorns, where we talk about untold money stories from some of the most inspiring people in the world. Now, I've had my own issues with investing and with finances and the way that I was raised. And it's something that I've been really intentional about getting better about and having these difficult conversations. But we do want to normalize and make things more accessible. So I've always talked about the Acorns app and how amazing it's been for people who want to get started in investing, who've been investing, to see their money grow. So who better to talk to than Noah Kerner, who is the CEO of Acorns. Hi, Noah.
Hi, it's good to be here.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So my background is all in startups. I grew up in New York City in the East Village, and I was a hip-hop kid. I grew up around hip-hop culture in public schools. And my first company right out of college was the first one-stop shop for hip-hop on the web. And that was the beginning of sort of that journey of growing things, starting things, building things. And for me, it was always about things I was passionate about and things I thought, well, wouldn't this be cool if I could broaden access to other people to get these things? And at the time, New York City was the only place you could get DJ equipment, hip hop fashion, that kind of thing. Maybe LA, some other places. And so that was the journey, and all the way to Acorns. Now this is about broadening access to saving and investing and helping everyday people save and invest small amounts of money regularly so that they can build a better future for themselves.
Well, let's back up, Noah.
Let's back up.
And talk about your upbringing in New York City. What were your parents teaching you about money growing up? Because I do feel like that's important as far as establishing our own mindset.
In my household, money was actually not a big topic of discussion. And part of the reason for that was my mother actually made more money than my father.
Hey.
And so there was a little bit of like that thing in my household where we didn't talk as much about it. So it wasn't really a big topic of conversation. But my first experience, sort of in the world really learning about money was my father led community development for banks. So he was like one of the first social responsibility officers. And he worked on investing the bank's money into different community projects. And the summer of my junior year in high school, he got me a job as a bank teller. So that was my first experience, like really working behind the glass, interacting with people on these topics and learning how difficult it was for people to understand money. What is this? What's this acronym? How does this work?
Right.
Why should I get this account?
So when did you open your first bank account?
16. And I think my parents co-signed on it. So I got a checking account. I was starting to make cash as a kid selling baseball cards when I was like 11 or 12. And then we talked about this, but I got turntables when I was 14 and started doing nightclubs at 16. So I was making money. So I had to put it somewhere. So I had a checking account. And I think I started to understand savings account and that was this other account where you would put money to earn interest. And at the time, I think there was interest on savings accounts, which right now there's not really.
Yeah, there's definitely not.
Yeah.
So what were you doing with the money that you were making?
I was saving it, or I was reinvesting it into DJ equipment.
That's great.
So like 14 years old, my birthday present was turntables, but they were not like the best turntables. So I started to learn. And then my first investment was to buy Technics 1200s.
Everybody wanted those Technics 1200s. You were not a real DJ unless you had those.
Absolutely. So that was the first, so it was reinvesting in myself and then thinking about putting money into the checking account or savings account.
So you started DJing at an early age. You said you were 16?
14.
14 when you started DJing.
Yeah.
And so talk a little bit about that because you actually worked with a superstar.
Yeah, well, I started doing clubs at 16 and then all the way through kind of 20, 21, 22. And then I started working with some different artists and played with Jennifer Lopez and her band. And, and actually I opened for different hip hop acts and things like that. But it was really this exercise for me in creativity. I loved music. I loved hip hop as a kid. I was surrounded by it. And then commerce.
Right.
And I don't know exactly where that kind of intersection or fascination with the intersection of creativity and commerce came from. It might have been growing up in New York City and just the kind of like always on hustle of the city. And then the creativity of the East Village, which is where so much music and art and fashion was sort of birthed.
Somehow you also found time to go to college.
I did. And, my co-founder for my first company, I met in college.
There you go.
So that was the beginning.
College was when I really got into debt. Because remember they had those booths where you could open a credit card and get a free t-shirt?
Yeah.
So I had several different credit cards at that time. I think my limit was only $600, but I definitely ran all of them up. And then I wouldn't even open the bill because I was like, I can't even pay it.
Yeah.
I was making $6.50 an hour working at the store on campus. So what about you as far as your first credit card or establishing credit?
Well, so funny enough, I was, seeing all that happen as a college kid, I think influenced my thinking later on. Actually, one of the products I made later in life was the first student credit card to reward responsibility rather than spending. And it's because as a college kid, you get these promotions for credit cards and these tables set up on campus and premiums to get XYZ or bonus rewards or whatever. And then you see kids graduating with $10,000, $20,000 in credit card debt.
Right. And student loans.
And these products are obviously not constructed to be very productive for people who don't have a lot of money, and particularly young people who get into trouble and don't understand the long-term ramifications. I think that was one of the big things as a kid that you see is you just don't have a long-term mindset, and you're really focused on the moment and the present.
So you were DJing in nightclubs, and then you opened for some hip hop acts. You DJ with J-Lo's band. When did you say, okay, it's time for me to switch and pivot in my career?
I was doing that all the way through I started my first company at 21, and I was doing this kind of at nights. I was spinning like 4 or 5 nights a week. And then during the creation of companies, I actually took 6 months off to work with Jennifer Lopez. And that was, so it was kind of side by side in parallel. And for me, it was like the process of building companies and then performing and working in that world and getting access to these different worlds. There was a lot of parallel and there was a lot of kind of symbiosis, I thought. So playing in front of crowds every night, getting a sense for what moves people, how to lose people, all that stuff was really productive for me in terms of building things, bringing things to market, understanding how to market things and how people respond to things. So it was a really good balance for me, going through those in parallel.
Now let's discuss these startups. Your first one that you had was what?
It's called One Level.
Okay, One Level. So what One Level was?
It was the first one-stop shop for hip-hop on the web. Yeah. And then I started an agency that was helping music artists and music labels break out into the new world order, do different things on the streets, online. And that caught the attention of big brands. And so we started doing product development and marketing for big companies like Chase.
And that was Noise.
That was Noise.
Okay.
And that experience, like we did hundreds of products and marketing campaigns across every category. It was always oriented around young people. And I think trying to help companies build better things for young people. And while we were doing that, it occurred to me that we should have top music producers produce original soundtracks for brands. So started another company, and these were both at the same time, called Soundproof, that represented a lot of the top music producers for commercial music production. And I was always one of those people that, just loved to work and pursue and pursue passion. And we were working with all these companies that were always talking about this idea of cool. How do we become cool? How to, And so wrote a book called Chasing Cool with the guy who had run Barney's. And that was all that stuff was in my 20s.
How did you learn how to negotiate when it comes to money? Because I find for myself, even having to negotiate your value and how much you should be charging for things can sometimes be difficult for me. So when you're getting these clients or when you're pitching things, how do you know what to ask for?
I think my parents helped encourage me to be courageous. And I think my parents, again, I didn't come from a lot, but they really taught me a sense of self-worth. And that was a really important thing in the household. So I think in a negotiation, you have to know your value. And this is one of the big things, obviously, in society now. People, different salary levels for different people who may not feel comfortable asking for things. I think a lot of that for me came from having good parents and imbuing a sense of self-worth. And so in those moments, and the other thing I would say is you have to know that you can walk away.
Right.
The power of no, I actually think is the most important word in business, the word no.
As a woman, I read an article one time that said that we don't negotiate our salaries the way that we should. And not only that, we don't ask for raises as often as men do. And it inspired me to actually go in and ask for a raise. And it worked out even better than I could have anticipated. But sometimes it is knowing, like you said, your value and your own worth to be able to go in and ask for what it is and research.
Yeah.
I find that when you see other people in those positions and you can do research and find out what are people getting paid to do this and to do what I'm doing, because sometimes people don't want to talk about their salaries either.
Yeah, for sure.
Or the money that they're getting. And that is harmful, I feel like, to other people. But it's a conversation people don't like to have.
By the way, I'm not necessarily the best at negotiating for my own money.
Right, me too.
But when I'm negotiating, for instance, on behalf of Acorns, I'm tough. And when I feel like I'm standing up for something else, something that I think is important for society, I'm tough and I negotiate hard.
You don't want to say, I don't want them to call my bluff.
Yeah.
And then now I have to walk away. But it's good to know that this is not my only option and that I'm bringing something to the table for you too.
Yeah.
So it would be in your benefit to figure out how we can make this work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, when it comes to partnerships for yourself as an entrepreneur, how do you decide who would be a good partner for you when you're in business?
All values. So like for Acorns, we have very clear, we have 5 values: lead with heart, make bold decisions, always build trust, never stop growing, and find a way. And I think about those values and our mission statement, which begins with benevolence and courage, ... And when I look at the companies we partner with, the people we partner with, does it align to the values that we've assigned to the company? Does it align to the mission? And then also from a brand perspective, does it reflect the brand idea of from tiny acorns, mighty oaks do grow? We have a partnership with Dwayne Johnson. Obviously, he's an investor in the company. And one of the things that really, that we connected with was his story of, his production company is called $7 Productions because he started with $7 in his pocket. And now you look at what he's accomplished and what he's become, the idea of tiny acorns to not that he was ever tiny, but tiny
he
acorns.
was at one point a tiny acorn.
He was in a way, when he was born. But from the perspective of how much money he had, and then growing into a mighty oak and the different things that he's done along that path. So we think, from a values perspective, from a mission perspective, and then from a brand perspective. And I think if you're building something, it's really important to take the time to understand and know who you are, what you stand for, what you represent, define it, write it down. And then you can look at everything you do through that lens and say, does this company or this person align to those things?
And I wanted to ask you, for people who are intimidated because they've never invested, what would you tell them is the best way to get started as a tiny acorn?
I mean, I would say obviously start using Acorns, but seriously, it's like little bit by bit, small amounts. You should start as early as you can. You should do it as often as you can. And you should do it always. For me, I've gotten a lot of good advice over the years about this kind of thing. And I think the thing that resonates the most with me, the couple things are every downturn in history has ended in an upturn. And so like right now we're in choppy waters. The market's volatile, things are rough. The people who suffer are the people who panic and pull out their money when the market goes down. You didn't lose money unless you pulled it out of the market. So that's one. The other one, and this is the thing I see with people when they truly understand the power of investing, is when they understand compounding. It's what Albert Einstein called the 8th wonder of the world. But it basically means if you keep your money in the market, particularly in a diversified portfolio, and you keep it in for a long time, as your money earns interest, your money grows on top of your money over time. So you can see a small principal investment, if you keep it in the market for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, grow into something really meaningful over time.
That's so true. And I always talk about this. When I first opened up my own IRA, it was because somebody who was a financial advisor was like, what, you don't have this? We got to open one for you right away. And there's a lot of programs, even at work, where your company might do a match for you, and you should take advantage of things like that. Because I felt so much confidence in seeing this little bit of money that I was putting in, $200 a month, grow the way that it did, that it made me feel more confident to try and do other things. And even with Acorns, our security at work, he was saying, tell Noah I said hi because I actually have an Acorns account and that is how I'm paying for my trip. Can you talk about the different options of things that people can do on Acorns when it comes to setting financial goals?
We are known for the roundup. That's just the way that works is you sign up, you connect your bank account and debit or credit cards that you spend with, and then we round up every purchase you make to the nearest dollar and take the spare change and invest it into a diversified portfolio for you. So that's I think we're really known for that idea of rounding up, but that's really just the beginning. It's really easy past that point to set up a recurring investment. You can do it by the day, the week or month. So $5 a day if you can, $20 a week, whatever you can do to supplement that, that money. So if you've got roundups going, which can be about $30 a month, you do as much as you can on a recurring basis. And all that goes into a diversified portfolio of what are called ETFs, which is exchange traded funds. And that's really just baskets of stocks and bonds. What it means is your money's totally diversified. So you're not investing in individual stocks or individual cryptocurrencies or risky assets. You've got your money. You're basically buying a large percentage of the American economy.
Right.
And then we have a retirement account, which is tax advantaged. We help you set that up. We automate it for you. We take the kind of heavy lifting out of it. We pick the type. We do that work for people because we know it's intimidating. We have a kids account.
Right.
So for parents, you can start saving and investing for your kids. It's called Acorns Early. And then we have a full bank account product. And my favorite feature actually in that is we help you automatically invest a portion of your paycheck.
Okay.
So if you move your paycheck to Acorns, what's the worst? What's the thing we do as soon as we get money? We spend it.
Yes.
This says, and it defaults at 10%. 10% gets invested across all the investment accounts.
That works best for me because I don't even notice it missing. And
right,
you're
exactly.
right. Like when I do have it, I'm like, oh, this is how much I have to spend.
Yeah.
You know, and I do feel like it's exciting when you start seeing that money add up, no matter what. Like you start feeling really good. Like, okay, now I want to be more aggressive and put more in.
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about like, when you look at the power of the platform, if you did 10% of your paycheck, let's say you make $50,000 a year. If you did 10% of your paycheck, that's a lot. You know, that's a lot of money.
Right.
If you're every 2 weeks you're getting $2,000, then 10% of that is $200 every 2 weeks. That's $400 a month plus spare change is $30. It's $430 a month. That really adds up. We have a bunch of financial literacy content, so we try to help people get smarter with their money. And then we have a feature that helps you earn bonus investments from hundreds of retail partners.
I love rewards.
Everybody loves rewards.
I bought my first Louis Vuitton bag with some rewards.
Exactly. Except this one gets invested for you.
Right.
So
but that's great.
Yeah, exactly. So it really comes back to that whole idea of Acorns being about saving and investing. Most companies in the banking space and in the debit and credit card space are promoting spending. We're actually promoting saving.
Right.
So we want to find ways for you to spend less and save more. That's a pretty unusual approach to financial services. And it's a very outcome-oriented approach. You know, like our motivation is to get people to save and invest as much as possible, not to spend, not to trade, not to borrow. That's how we approach things.
Now, when it comes to integrity, because that's something that you talk about a lot, how can you choose the types of companies that you want to invest in? Because there might be some companies that you're like, they've done some shady things. I don't know that I would want to put my money there, or does it not matter?
I mean, the portfolios are diversified, and we use BlackRock and Vanguard funds. So those are automatically selected. We also have ESG portfolios that you can select that put money into different types of companies. And then in April, May, we're rolling out a feature that allows you to construct your own portfolio. And you can pick individual companies that you like. We still have ETFs in it to make sure it's diversified.
Right.
So, you know, it's a real balancing act from an investment perspective. We want to make sure you're investing in as many things as possible and you're as diversified as possible.
So I wanted to ask you about this tweet, just to go off topic a little, but this is about integrity. So Little Duval tweeted out, "Real billionaires see humans as livestock. Remember that next time you glorify and praise one." Now, somebody who is in this world of tech and finance, I'm sure you've seen some things. So what are your thoughts about that? Because in other words, I saw this turned into a huge debate on social media. In order for you to be rich, you have to see people as commodities and maybe not have the morals of, you know, someone who's not a billionaire.
I would flip that. I would say there's a lot of rich people who do see the world that way, but I don't think you need to see the world that way in order to become wealthy. You know, I don't see the world that way. That's not how I'm constructed. I know a lot of people who've made money that don't see the world that way. But I think things are constructed around growth. A lot of companies are constructed around growth at all costs, particularly in financial services. And I think if you get to the root of a company's business model and you ask the question, how does this company make money? What's the primary way this company makes money? And does that mechanism of making money align to what's best for people? You know, that's where you get your eyes. So to me, the root of integrity in business comes down to the business model, because if you're a company that's trying to grow, you're going to be motivated to grow your revenue. And if your revenue is tied to bad customer behaviors, like in financial services, overspending or overtrading, whatever, that company is going to be motivated to do things that aren't necessarily great. But of course, it's possible to do really well in life, being a good person.
A nice billionaire.
Yeah, I'm not sure there are a lot of nice, they say there's this interesting thing about New York, right? New Yorkers are kind but not nice. People in LA are nice but not kind. I mean, I think there's a lot of ruthless people in business, For sure, there's a lot of ruthless people in business. You also see the world shifting,
Right.
Like I feel like...
Yes, I agree.
I feel like younger people today care more about mission and purpose and trying to strike the balance between how can you have a mission-oriented entity and also build a successful business. And by the way, that's what we do. It's a hard balancing act.
Right.
I mean, it's a daily, hourly, weekly, monthly practice to say, we're not going to chase profits at all costs. We're not going to chase growth at all costs. We have this kind of mantra that says we're a growth company, not a grow at all cost company.
I love that. What do you attribute the success of Acorns to? You guys do have 4 million users.
Over 4 million, paying subscribers, actually. So I think starting with the market need, I think there's a big need for everyday people to save and invest money for the future. I would say, I think we have a really good brand. I think the brand metaphor, it really connects with people. People understand that idea of saving and investing tiny amounts, tiny acorns to mighty oaks. I think we have a good business model. I think we've made a product that's simple and easy to use and also delightful. And I think we're a very mission-oriented and values-oriented company. And I like to believe that our customers understand that about us, and that keeps them connected to us.
And plus, you do have a marketing background, because to have a great product, but for people to know about it is important too.
To me, you should be a product and a marketing company.
Right.
And you should think about marketing when you're building product, and you should always think about product when you're doing marketing. And I think the best leaders today hold those two things up both on high ground and think about the importance of both of those things. The marketing has to have integrity. The messages have to connect back to the values. The product has to be really simple, and you should always be thinking about how to build product that people are going to talk about and people are going to share.
One thing that I noticed that people talk about right now a lot is diversity, inclusion, equity, all of those things. So at Acorns, what's the stance on that? Because I feel like it has been something that, during this pandemic and seeing everything that's been happening with social justice has been a huge topic. People are more concerned and interested in what are the values of a company. So when it comes to Acorns, you guys are a financial and technology company, but when it comes to that, what's your stance?
My stance is where I grew up, which is in the East Village of New York City, and seeing the power of the mix, seeing the power of lots of different types of people come together in what I think, I'm biased, is the greatest city in the world. And what comes out of that, the energy, the things that emerge out of New York City. So I grew up seeing the power of diversity. So for me, that's what a company should be. We are for everyday Americans. Our customers are everybody across the country. So we have to represent that in the company. To me, the great things come from the mix.
Right.
When you have all kinds of different backgrounds, perspectives, races, genders, all of that. Yeah. So it's like you get all of that those different
viewpoints.
You need that. And you need that today, especially today.
How did you come up with the name Acorns anyway? I know what it represents, but sometimes the hardest thing is also, well, not the hardest thing, but sometimes just coming up with a name and a branding is something that takes a really long time. Was that something that was like, was it sit down, let's all discuss,
No, it was, so co-founder was walking in the forest in nature and picked up an acorn, and that was it.
Wow.
It was totally natural and organic. I think when people create brands, they need to think about the brand. A brand is an idea, and in this case, the acorn is a beautiful metaphor. For everybody to understand what saving and investing and that journey should be about. So I think again, I'm biased, but I think the Acorns brand is one of the great brands because it's truly a metaphor.
No, that's great. That's why sometimes you do have to take some time away and go to the forest.
You do?
And de-stress. And that's when some of your best ideas will come to you.
100%.
Well, Noah, you've been such a workaholic since you were young. How did you manage to find that balance? Because we also do want to stress, it used to be like, you'll sleep when you die. And that used to really be what people's mantra was, but that has changed so much. How did you manage to establish that balance between work and life?
I'll tell you, I've always been somebody who needs sleep. And when I was in my 20s, I used to think this idea was cool. Like, you don't need, people, we were talking about, you don't need to sleep. Who needs sleep? Like, but I've always needed sleep. And so I prioritize sleep. And for me, that's fundamental. Like, I actually think that's the most important, to get a good night's rest. Sometimes your mind's racing, so it's a little harder, but to get a good 7 or 8 hours of sleep every night. I say that to everybody, like, you have to prioritize that. And then, of course, having a good social life and spending time with your friends and your family and doing these things that you're passionate about. But I work a lot. But
you love it.
Yeah, and I do. I love it. So it's never felt, like I said in the beginning, for me, pursuing passions has been my work. And so it doesn't feel like work in the same way I think maybe other people might have that relationship. And I by the way, if you can do that, I think that's really important, to do the things that make you come alive.
Right. There's like a level of sacrifice that you have to do when it comes to even starting a business and knowing that, okay, I'm not going to have the time or the finances to do certain things. But once you get into that position to be able to take advantage, and even if it's something small, like even for myself, if I'm like, okay, I am going to, spend Friday night not going out, but at home, and I'm going to watch a movie on TV, and that is something that I have to look forward to. It can be something as small as that really helps me make it through like a couple of days that are really tough.
Yeah, but you also work really hard.
I know, I work a lot.
I mean, I don't think you can build something unless you're going to be committed to working really hard. So there's mythology to say like, this idea, like we all need balance. Mm-hmm. But if you're building a company from the ground up, and if that's going to be your journey, you're going to be working your ass off, and that's just reality.
And I wanted to ask you in closing, what will make you feel like you achieved what you set out to achieve at Acorns?
My purpose, and I think our company's purpose, is to help try to level the playing field. And so the way we look at, are we doing that, is how many people are using the product. We've helped people now save and invest over $12 billion in small amounts of money. So I would love that Acorns would have inspired 100 million everyday people in America to save and invest every day. That's an ambition. That doesn't mean all 100 million have to use Acorns. But if we can get that many people, parents, couples, kids, saving and investing, if 100 million everyday people in this country were doing that, we'd have a very different country and a very different future. And then I'd love to spread that around the planet. But having a solid foundation of financial wellness, and having a nest egg, and having that security and confidence matters a lot, as well as hope for the future. I think this is, so that's what we're focused on. And I'm going to spend my life working on trying to level the playing field in the different ways that I can.
I always think about how much different my life would be if I didn't have to worry about student loans, about rent, and how I would have been a lot more free to do the things and pursue the things that I want to. So I love the idea of leveling the playing field and generational wealth and teaching kids early, like you said, that's going to be a huge deal. And so I appreciate this. I do love Acorns. I've spoken about it even before meeting you personally. And it's something that I've recommended to people. And I know so many people that are on it. So that's why I felt like this was a great partnership for us to have, because I don't like to do things that I don't believe in. So I believe in Acorns and what you've done, and I've seen it and witnessed it myself. I do appreciate the work that you do, and I do think it's important, and I love the mission, and I love the integrity that you have, and you look 25 years old, so
I'm trying.
That's amazing too.
We appreciate your support too, Angie. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of the Breakfast Club also, so we appreciate your support very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Noah, so get ready for this. You might fumble when I ask you, because these are rapid fire questions.
Let's go.
First thing, okay, what did you spend your first big check on?
Techniques 1200s.
What's the best money move you ever made?
So when the pandemic hit and the market spiked down, I think probably everybody worried that the world was going to come to an end. And I had this moment of courage that there's two possibilities. The world's going to come to an end and nothing matters, or the world's not going to come to an end and every downturn ends in an upturn. And so I invested a whole bunch of my money in the market that day when the Dow was at 18,500.
Wow.
On that day. And Kara was looking at me like I was crazy. And I was pacing around. I'm like, I am crazy.
And
but in all the good ways.
Okay, so that was a great money move.
That was a great money move.
And what do you say is the best money advice you ever received?
Compounding is the eighth wonder of the world. When you understand the power of compounding, you understand investing. So I think that's the best advice. And I know from my experiences with people, like if I'm in an Uber or whatever, on the train, whatever I'm doing, and I talk to someone about Acorns, people say, why do you invest? What's the point? Well, the point is your money grows on top of your money if you stick with it and stay diversified. So I think that has to be the best.
What's the worst money advice you ever received?
I think in 2001 and 2008, my parents panicked and pulled their money out. And so that influenced my psychology. So that wasn't literal advice. Although actually my parents I think my parents were probably talking about anxiety around this time.
Right.
And so that, that was hard to overcome. And I think when people, and most people experience those kinds of encounters, whether with their family or friends or whoever, people panicking during those moments, and that kind of spreads around.
Yeah.
Don't spend too much time reading news media when there's a downturn or a bear market, because it is really hard to read all that information and make good decisions.
Okay, and what is a money mistake you learned the hard way?
I would say I had this idea in my mind, and there's a little bit of this in culture, that when you buy real estate, it always appreciates.
We talked about this. Yes.
And my first apartment didn't really appreciate, and I think in my brain, we talked about, like, I wasn't paying rent because I was paying a mortgage.
Right.
But in my brain, I was counting on it appreciating.
It was just flat.
It was flat, flat to down.
Okay.
Because the other thing you don't know about when you buy your first place is closing costs.
Yes.
And there was a lot of closing costs. So when you accounted for all of the costs, I lost money. And the problem was, I thought I was going to make money.
Right. You were like, going to cash out on this?
Yeah.
Great investment. Because people tell you real estate is always a great investment. And real estate, they're not making more of it. So you have to they're not making more land.
Right.
So invest in land.
Right.
But it doesn't always go up in value. Anyway.
Right. And this was in the city. This is where there's like low supply, high demand. But I think over time, like over a lot of time,
right.
like that apartment would be worth, a bunch more now. But I had it for a bunch of years. And you have to be careful when you think about, your investments, which is why diversification
absolutely
is so important.
I think we even learned that when people weren't paying rents in these commercial properties just now.
Yeah.
And that was really difficult for people and for homeowners who had people living in their properties and didn't have to pay rent. And so that was a hard time for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But one thing I learned too is I do not want to pay mortgage insurance. So anything I can do to avoid that. I had a realtor who definitely tried to convince me to spend X amount of dollars, put 10% down, and I would have had to pay mortgage insurance. And that to me was like such a waste of money.
Yeah.
What is your favorite thing to spend money on?
Well, the first two things that come to mind are my fiance, Kara, and our we call her senior puppy. She's a 13-year-old, and she's been sick. Sorry, Kara, but I'd say my favorite thing to spend money on is making sure Bella is still here. So I guess the most rewarding thing to spend money on is love.
And what is your least favorite thing to spend money on?
Bella. I don't like spending money on her because when I'm spending money on her, she's sick.
Right. I would say parking. I feel like I hate spending all this money on parking.
You had the parking app when we had breakfast.
Yeah, I had to pay. That's at the meter. But when I have to park in a garage, for some reason, like I will spend money on all kinds of things. But when it comes to paying for parking, it's outrageous, the amount of money. I just paid $81 to park.
It is
that
crazy.
Feels like crazy to me.
It is crazy. I think I learned not to love spending money, which is probably good and in a way bad. Because I don't spend a lot of money on things.
Frugal.
Yeah.
What would be your money advice to 20-year-old Noah?
Put your money in the market, diversify, stick with it, don't panic, have a long-term view. And anytime you think that the world is coming to an end and the market is going to crash and never come back, remember that every downturn ends in an upturn.
And last but not least, what is your best money advice to someone on their come up?
Two things. I would say invest in yourself and make sure you save and invest small amounts wherever you can. Mm-hmm. Spare change, a little bit a day, a week, whatever you can, and stay committed to it and set it up and automate it so you don't get off your commitment.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me and for having this conversation about money, this important conversation. And we appreciate you so much, Noah, and we appreciate Acorns so much.
Same to you, Angie. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Angela Yee, and thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you hit me up on Twitter, on Instagram @Acorns, and let me know who you'd like me to talk to next about one of my favorite topics, money. All right, now let's get to the business. Listen up. These conversations do not reflect the views of Acorns. The material is only informational. It's not investment advice. It's not a recommendation, an offer, or sale of securities. Remember that investing involves risk, which includes the loss of principal. We always tell you that. Investment advisory services offered by Acorns Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Brokerage services are provided to clients of Acorns by Acorns Securities, LLC, an SEC-registered broker-dealer and member at FINRA SIPC. For more information, visit acorns.com.